Look, I'm not saying you're going to be happy about it, but the third one of these is going to get all of us. Believe it or not, I'm sorry reality is catching up to all of us, but Pokemon turns 30 on Friday, February 27th, 2026. And as always, we are likely going to be treated with a host of reveals, news, updates, and more importantly, things to buy that Pokemon fans, young and old, will flock to. And while there are plenty of rumors, as there are every year, today it's our job to sit down and run through 5 predictions for the things we could expect with a little extra Clefairy dust. What are the 5 reveals and hopes and dreams that could happen on Pokemon Day that would make the day worthy of 3 decades on this earth? Starting off, let's just go with the easy one. Everybody's predicting this. It's no fun, but Pokemon Generation 10 for the 30th anniversary. It's likely going to make some kind of debut for Pokemon Day this year. There was a massive leak that happened at the end of 2025, if you weren't aware. We're not going to rely on it heavily for the guidance, the predictions today. We will circle back to it for prediction number 5. I will tell you that right now. But it is seemingly likely that Pokemon Generation 10 Wind and Waves will be a major part of Nintendo's year for the Switch 2, as well as Pokemon Day 2026 and the 30th anniversary. So for the core predictions, I'm expecting we're going to see a region overview trailer showcase the 3 new starters, and we are going to see that it is a region based off of a new territory for Pokemon, a real-world territory that Pokemon seems to be targeting more so lately, Southeast Asia. The word is Indonesia. For years, there were rumors that it was going to be Greek, another European region, because it was seemingly leaning into a island theme, like we saw with Alola. But as more and more information came out, and again, the major leak from last fall, it does seem that we are focusing more on a more Southeast Asian island region. So it's going to be exciting. It's going to be a new take on Pokemon, getting away from US and Europe, which has really dominated the last several generations. I think this is probably going to, unfortunately, be another $80 Switch game, like Mario Kart World. I think if anything is going to hit that again, it's probably going to be Pokemon. $80 each, please. But the reality, the predictions, the cold hard truths of what we're likely going to be paying for this game, I would rather push that aside now for a focus on the hopes. What is the best case scenario here, outside of pricing structure? Best case scenario, I think it's a Switch 2 exclusive. We saw how the bump in resolution and frame rate for Scarlet and Violet really transformed the game on Switch 2. I would absolutely love to see if the current longest dev cycle for a modern Pokemon game gets free range of this new hardware to really shine. I also hope that character design wise, we are looking much more along the lines of ZA, because those characters looked incredible, so much style compared to the dorky dolls, I will call them, in Scarlet and Violet, good lord. And the final hope for this Generation 10 segment, I just hope the starters are great. Generation 9 had a really solid lineup of starters, my boy Fuecoco, Sprigatito, as well as Quaxley. They all were solid to good to great. Previous generations have also had a range in that way. I want it to be better than Gen 8. Gen 8, I feel like nobody was happy. Like, in a dream world, we get back to like a Gen 3-4 all killer no filler, but give us a repeat of the Gen 9 spread. Good across the board, please. Thank you. The update section of Pokemon Day. What's the latest for all the mobile games? Cafe Remix, Pokemon Go, Pokemon Unite, Pokemon Sleep, Pokemon Smile. I predict we will see updates on all of these things as always. I also predict that we will get, at least for me, an exciting new look update at the Aardman collaboration. If you're unfamiliar, Aardman is the claymation stop-motion animation studio most well known for series like Wallace and Gromit, Chicken Run. I adore Aardman. I believe it's Pichu and Sirfetch'd getting some kind of series. I can't wait. I really hope to see an update on that one. For another prediction of something that I think that will show up here, and again, cold hard reality, we will be about a week away from the release of Pokemon Pokopia, a game that I think is going to be absolutely massive, one of the biggest games of the year, not only on the Switch 2, but across the industry. It's Pokemon Minecraft. plus Animal Crossing. Like, remember how major Animal Crossing was, pandemic aside, like, getting people hooked in on that cutesy cozy lifestyle? Multiply that by the power of Pokemon. Like, it's gonna be a big deal. And I think on Pokemon Day, in addition to a one last pre-order now trailer, we're probably gonna get a tease of DLC for the game, because that seems like a game primed for DLC and expansion, a new wave of content later in the year. And as we saw last year at Pokemon, they are absolutely not at all worried about announcing an expansion or a DLC before the game is out. But my hopes for the updates is that it takes up less than a quarter of the entire presentation. Listen, we all know it's gonna happen. None of us are really happy about it, but if we're dealing with a 40-minute presentation this year, we're just spitballing 10 minutes on this. And hopefully this will be the time for the Pokemon Company and Nintendo to finally give us a date, maybe even release Pokemon Colosseum and Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness on the GameCube Classics library for Nintendo Switch Online subscribers. And this is the one you've been waiting for, number 3, the one that everybody is going to begrudgingly swipe the card for. Shameless appeals to nostalgia. And it's fitting that we were just talking about some classic, beloved games from the early 2000s in Colosseum and XD Gale of Darkness, because I do believe the rumor that we will be getting a release of Fire Red and Leaf Green on the eShop. 10 years ago, for the 20th anniversary, the Pokemon Company did something that nobody really ever expected would actually happen, in that they released Red, Blue, and Yellow on the 3DS eShop, a digital release of Generation 1 of Pokemon. Later followed that up with Generation 2, Gold, Silver, Crystal. They had home compatibility, it was a massive deal, and they were $10 a pop. Nobody really believed that would actually happen. Now, because 10 years have passed, because the Pokemon Company already released Red, Blue, Yellow, I do think they'd be like, well, we did that. Let's do Fire Red and Leaf Green next. Like, that rumor popping up to me was the most sensible thing in the world. It is so particular that I believe it, and I do hope it leads to Emerald down the line. But the Game Boy Advance generation of Pokemon fans are now at that age where they are freely spending what little disposable income they have on a smidge of nostalgia to get things brighter in their life once again. And bringing Fire Red, Leaf Green again down the line, hopefully Ruby, Sapphire, Emerald, to the Switch eShop for purchase. I'm going to say $20. I'm, again, not happy about it, but I'm going to do it instantly. And I believe the rumor that it's going to have Pokemon Home integration, so that'll be nice and fun. But beyond shameless appeals to nostalgia to the Game Boy Advance generation, I also think we are going to be getting more appeals to the original Pokemania craze. And I think we are going to see some reprints of some like classic Pokemon merchandise. Stuff like the Burger King gold cards that came in the giant Pokeballs that you could get. Stuff along those lines. Things that collectors overprice today, but fans will buy for much more money than they probably want to, because it's just an official re-release. Not an absurd price, but a price that's like, oh, okay, I can stomach it. Let me just buy the Fat Pikachu for $50? I don't know. Now, the hope for this, you would think, is just make things cheaper than they are likely going to be. However, we know that's not going to happen. So if I'm hoping for anything, that is going to appeal to my nostalgia and get me spending money, I at least want it to be something fun. So I do think Nintendo will supply a way for us to get Pokemon Red, Blue, Yellow, even Gold, Silver, Crystal back in our hands this year. But I think it will be in capitalizing on the Chinese emulator handheld market that has developed and flourished over the past several years. If you're unaware, there's an entire subculture of like single board computing gaming that is covering every single niche of, I was nostalgic for this specific device, let's make a replica of it that can play everything. So Nintendo is clearly aware that this market exists, and I think they are probably going to want to enter it in some way. And in my head, the thing that made the most sense is using Pokemon to get there, because as much as I love Tetris and Link's Awakening, most people think of Game Boy, they think Pokemon. So in celebration of 30 years of Pokemon, the series that really defined handheld gaming for Nintendo for generations, I think we will get a Game Boy Classic, but it is only going to have, officially, Pokemon Red, Blue, Yellow, Gold, Silver, Crystal on it. It's going to be modeled after the blue and yellow Game Boy Color with the little Pokemon on the lens, and it's going to cost like $100. I imagine this will support local trading and battling. It will not support Pokemon Home, but I think they're going to want to take advantage of that nostalgia, that need to have an item, and they're going to release it as a stocking stuffer, and it's going to sell 30 million copies probably. But enough about the past and appeals to nostalgia. I think the other major thing that will be a focus of Pokemon Day 2026 is a vision of the next 30 years, the future of Pokemon, the here and now. So for predictions 4 and 5, we are looking ahead. Most immediately for prediction 4, let's get into what I think is also going to be a sleeper hit of this year, Pokemon Champions. I imagine for Pokemon Champions, the Universal Battler, which is going to have connectivity to Pokemon Home, have a Switch version, have a mobile version, where you can just transfer your Pokemon from the main console RPGs to and modify them. It is basically a battle simulator where all video game competitive play in the future will be taking place. It's not going to be the focus of the year, clearly, when we have something like Generation 10 in the mix, but it's going to be a big deal. And my hope here is similar to the reinvention, the rejuvenation that Pokemon as a series saw 10 years ago for the 20th anniversary, summer 2016, with Pokemon Go, which gave us a taste of what world peace would be like. My hopes for the 30th in 2026, 10 years later, with this new initiative on mobile, is that Pokemon Champions lights a fire in the world and gets people out there making new friends, whipping out their phone if they discover that they also like Pokemon, and seeing whose core 6 is just better off. I see a world where Pokemon Champions becomes a very big deal and gets a lot of casual or just Pokemon players into competitive play. I'm sure the Pokemon Company wants this. I'm sure they want to make the Pokemon worlds even more approachable and a bigger deal, and I see Pokemon Champions being the avenue to get there. Also see it just being a big focus of Pokemon Day. For the final prediction for what's coming Pokemon Day, this is also based off of information from the leak. It seemed very early days, it was just a project title, but we are reaching back again to nostalgia, because think, it's 30 years of Pokemon. It is time for a big announcement. Gen 10 is a big announcement, but this is an announcement of something that has been a dream for players really since Generation 2. I believe the final last little tease coming in Pokemon Day this year is going to be very simple, really just an executive behind a desk saying some things, the way we saw like the first console Pokemon RPG for a Switch get announced. I think we are going to get a confirmation that currently in active development, there is an ongoing multi-region Pokemon game. The Pokemon MMO that people have wanted forever. This did leak. This is kind of out there that there is a multi-region Pokemon game that does seem to be some kind of living world, at least in some kind of ideation right now. And because of how devastatingly massive that leak was, I do think they are going to want to control the narrative as we get closer to this game becoming a more tangible thing that players will be able to get their hands on. Now, I don't think it is releasing anytime remotely soon. I think if they do announce it here, it's going to be, again, executive behind a desk. This is a thing we're working on. You'll see it when you see it. And maybe that's like 2030. But the Pokemon MMO, the Pokemon multi-region game, the Pokemon living world, I think will get announced. And working title will be like World of Pokemon or something, but they want to get it out there and let people know that, hey, yeah, the future Pokemon is bright and we are finally doing the thing that you've all wanted. But fingers crossed, the hope is that it's like a return to pixel art or HD 2D, because a project of this scope, it's going to have to be manageable. But those are my predictions, my hopes, my dreams, and expectations for what we could be getting out of Pokemon Day this year. Now again, as I led with Generation 10, I do think it is very likely that that is the big takeaway this year, and the Pokemon Company decides to sit on the Project Seed MMO idea, if it's maybe not as stable as some people are hoping it is right now. But down below, please let us know what you are expecting out of Pokemon Day this year. Is it just Generation 10? Are you hoping for something else? And do you believe that Fire Red and Leaf Green are going to be the Shadow Drop retro games that are re-released this time around? I'm so curious to hear what you have to say, and if you're looking forward to the 30th anniversary of Pokemon. But we will all see what's in store on February 27th together. We will get back together and talk about how it all goes. But until then, thanks so much for watching. I will see you next time.